brilliant speakers, I have a few notes for you. First, we request you keep your mobile phones on silent. And if you haven't yet picked up your pre-ordered book, or more importantly would like to buy like 18 more copies, we have them for sale at the register back there at the end of the event. The sighting will be up here at the front table. It will form a beautiful line that goes between film and TV and nature, and then it will help us funnel to the exit, and it'll be a great old time. And we want you to be aware that this is currently being live streamed, so if you do not want to find yourself on the internet, just be careful, the camera is over here. The brilliant moderator for our event this evening is Tatiana Johnson-Boria. She is the author of Nocturne and Joy, which we have for sale back there as well, and winner of the 2024 Julia Award Hal Book Prize in Poetry. As an educator, artist, facilitator, and mother, she uses her writing practice to dismantle racism, reckon with trauma, cultivate healing, and to explore the complex magic of mothering. She has received fellowships and awards from Tin House, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, McDowell's, and the Brother Thomas Fellowship, among many, many others. Tatiana is a 2017 Pushcart Prize nominee. She teaches at Grove Street and has been on faculty at Emerson College, among many other institutions. And her work appears or is also forthcoming in the Academy of American Poets, Plowshares, Kenyon Review Online, and many more. But tonight's conversation, as you know, is featuring the brilliant author, Michelle Gurule. She is a writer and educator based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Her creative work, which explores the complexities of sex work, class power, and Michelle's intersectional identity as queer mixed ethnicity woman, has appeared in The Offing, Joyland, Story Quarterly, Drunk Monkeys, Homology, and Alien. In 2021, her essay Exit Route won Story Quarterly's Nonfiction Prize, and she currently teaches writing at Arizona State University as well as the University of Colorado Boulder. Thank You, John is a Best American Essays notable Michelle Gurule's debut memoir. It is heartfelt, laugh out loud, tragic comedy of errors based on her time spent as an inexperienced sugar baby in 2010's Denver. But I know y'all are just as excited to me to hear these brilliant writers speak. So without further ado, please help me welcome them to the store.
Welcome, everyone. If the mic is on. Okay. We're going to start with a reading for Michelle. So, Michelle, kick us off.
Okay. Yeah, thanks so much to Brooklyn for having us and everyone for being here. And Tatiana, thanks so much for being in conversation with me. I'm really excited to meet you. And hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My book, Thank You, John. Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's a recount of the years that I spent as a sugar baby in Denver. And maybe, can I read here? Is that okay? I'm going to read for you, but maybe it's easier for me to have a little mic stand. And just to give you a little summary, it just captures like 3 years about being a sugar baby, and it's also so much about class and identity. And people always ask me like, oh, like, do you take a hard stance on sex work? And I think what they mean is like, do you find it empowering? Did you find it empowering or disempowering to be a sex worker? And my what I always say is that this book is about the nuance of sex work, and it's about how empowering it is to have financial security. So I'll read a little bit from chapter 4. It's called First Base at the Cheesecake Factory. I like this chapter because I like the title, but also because I think it gives like a good example of sort of most of the characters in the book, which are like my family, me, and then John. So I'm going to read from that, and I think the only real context you need is that for Christmas, he basically says, what do you want for Christmas? And then I'm like, oh, I want to go to the dentist. And I sort of know I have like a mouthful of cavities, but I told him like, I think it's going to be 1. So there's going to be a shock number in there. Then you can be shocked like him. So I'm going to start from there. Okay, so this is First Base at the Cheesecake Factory. Be aggressive, be patient, set your expectations high, but not too high. I was in the dressing room of Penthouse, scrolling through blogs on seekingarrangements.com. This was the site's advice for how to make one's profile stand out from the crowd. Learning about the process was exhausting. How many emails did income-clear daddies click through before picking a girl? How many messages did babies send to snag a date? How was anyone supposed to stand out with a few photos and a tight word limit? I wasn't on the site to make a profile. I was searching for insider answers to what sex with a sugar daddy might be like. That or a listicle about how to disassociate during the sex. I had gone to Reddit first and skimmed through vague responses to the question, what's it like to sleep with your SD? One person wrote, your body is his wonderland. Another said, you are someone he can explore his fantasies with. This made me queasy. I prayed that John's fantasies were vanilla, with sprinkles at most. While I would have never contemplated John's fantasies willingly, they had been heavy on my mind since last night. After my 5th lucrative and sexless meal with him, I had arrived home with paper carry-out bags dangling from my fingers. Ever since I told John that food was my mom's love language, he suggested that I order to-go meals for my family, 2 entrees and 2 desserts. As a thank you, he'd said, never clarifying for what. My family had been dispersed across the apartment's 900 square feet, but after they'd heard my keys jingling in the door, they ran to greet me in the kitchen. What'd you get us, they said. What'd you get us? My mom scooched behind me to shuffle through our utensil drawer, which contained a sea of cellophane-wrapped plasticware. She divvied out forks for the entrees and sporks for dessert. Roast beef and mashed potatoes with gravy, I announced. A hand tugged it out of my grip. Before it even hit the counter, the lid was off and all 3 forks ravaged the meat. What else? What else? My sister said with a full mouth. My hand plunged into the bag and reappeared with another container. I felt like a magician pulling rabbits from a hat. My family's admiring oohs and ahs added to the effect. Chicken strips and french fries. I had to order this off the kids' menu because they didn't have an adult version, I said, and they didn't include any ketchup. That's okay, we have some, my nephew said, skipping to the living room / my bedroom, where McDonald's sauce packets were strewn across the coffee table. Grandma took me after school. Though I soaked it up as a kid, my mom's love of gifting McDonald's had been a big tension between us ever since I watched Super Size Me when I was 12. Early puberty had led me to a fraught relationship with my body, and by the time I watched filmmaker Morgan Spurlock clock his 30-day weight gain at 24 pounds, I had already been at dieting for 2 years, by which I mean ordering off Taco Bell's fresco menu or simply not eating. The only 2 ways I understood it might make my body smaller. Of course, it was dramatic that Spurlock consumed only McDonald's and Coca-Cola products and a lot of alcohol for 30 days, but minus the liquor, my family's diet was not far off. Even worse, Spurlock's health seemed to deteriorate. His cholesterol had increased and his risk of heart disease doubled. My mom already took a handful of pills for these same exact issues. Terrified, I'd stormed into my mom's room demanding an explanation for feeding both of us trans fats. We eat perfectly fine, she said, and believe me, it's better than being hungry, a line that I could never really argue with. Although pricier, I suspected the food I was supplying from my dates was not much healthier than Mickey D's. So I made a small suggestion over the sound of their feast. Hey, let's treat my dinners with John like an indulgence for all of us once a week. What do you say? My sister rolled her eyes. We don't all want to be skinny like you, bitch. My mom slapped her fingers appreciatively, slam poetry style, and then she asked, what'd you bring for dessert? Tiramisu and gingerbread toffee cake. Nasty, my sister scowled. Well, maybe you should get your own sugar daddy and have him buy us desserts, I said. Damn, relax. I'm just saying there were probably better options on the menu. How would you know, I asked. You've never been to a 5-star restaurant in your life. I'll have some of both, my nephew said, shoving in. Terima what? If sugar was the primary ingredient, it was a yes for him. Chewy licked a dollop of whipped cream from his fingertips. Yum. I raised an eyebrow at my sister. After they'd finished, I told them to thank you, John. This was our ritual. I demanded that my family show gratitude, so the universe knew that we wanted the takeout to continue. Thank you, John, my mom and sister said to the room. Extra big thank you, John, my nephew said, a whipped cream mustache as an upper lip, for the best cake I have ever tasted. I sent John a message. They're eating dinner now. They love it. Heart. He texted back, I'm so glad I can make you and your loved ones happy. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. You were so much fun. I slipped back into my mom's room and uncovered my safe, which I hid on her closet shelf in case of intruders. The lock had broken a few weeks earlier, but I still preferred it here over a bank, where the IRS couldn't see it. I unfolded the white envelope John gave me and counted the $100 bills. I closed the lid, finishing a sugary crumble from between my back molars. It tasted expensive. I had spent much of the night with my stomach in ropes, wondering how to break the news about my dental bill to John. My plan was to tell him over appetizers that the cost was ginormous, but there were credit options to cover whatever my Christmas gift didn't. When I couldn't manage the courage, I tried again during dinner, then dessert, and then in the parking lot, all to no avail. I knew the only way I'd manage was via text. Thank you for hanging out. I had a great time, I wrote back. And then a second message. I meant to tell you about my dental visit over dinner, but I was too embarrassed. Series of grimacing faces. I have 14 cavities, I need 2 crowns and 12 regular fillings. I know you probably weren't expecting this. I wasn't either, I lied. It's super expensive. John replied quickly, oh wow, your poor mouth. I'm sure this had to have been hurting you for a while. Ouchie, cry face. I would like to cover the bill, regardless of the cost. You make my life so much better, I want to make your life better too. I was in utter disbelief. How was this spectacular thing happening to me? I had lived the last 7 years tolerating toothaches. 7 years. Every semester of college I'd ever attended, every final I took, every kiss I had shared since high school, every single one of my nephew's birthday cakes were experienced through a gray, dull pain. And soon it would be healed. The receptionist helped me book bi-weekly appointments for the next 4 months. Dr. Hans recommended that we do the crowns first, which would take 2 visits each. They would have to drill, take impressions, and make temporary crowns before they could cement the permanent ones. After that, each section of my mouth would require its own day. I understood the meaning of miraculous then. Or better yet, I understood the way money could make miracles happen. Thank you, I texted back through blurry eyes. It wasn't generous enough, but I had no other words. My phone pinged again a few minutes later. My pleasure. Another ping. I really, really love spending time with you and taking care of you. Heart. If you are having a nice time with me and want to continue hanging out with me, then I would like something in return from you. There was no imaginative way to describe it. My heart sank. I was so blind with relief that I'd forgotten a dreaded request was to be expected. It must be said that John asking me for sex was the obvious next step in our arrangement, but after 5 weeks without so much as a peck, and he asking if we were friends, a part of me, microscopic and stupid, believed that this request might never come. In a final bid to prove myself wrong, that John was not this typical, that life itself was not this typical, and my whole existence on earth had not been leading up to this moment of corporal exchange, I wrote, "What would you like from me in return?" John's next text was written in cringy innuendos. I'd like to get to first base, second base, and third base. But the more often we do home runs, the more gifts you will get. At last the time had arrived to ask myself, deeply and seriously, did I want to be John's sugar baby? Want was the wrong word. Did I want to sleep with John? No. But could I tolerate sex in exchange for money, which was to say the mundane things that make life remarkably better? Faithfully filling my gas tank, getting stitches if I'd ever sliced a finger, fixing my stupid teeth? There was no question about it. And I couldn't ignore the fact that this opportunity had miraculously arrived at my doorstep, like it had been delivered by a stork. So, did I want to be John's sugar baby? No. But broke as shit, totally heartbroken, and already feeling unlovable, it wasn't a moment in which there had been much left to lose. We agreed to start slow for my comfort. Perhaps our next dinner can end with a first kiss, he texted. And then I'm just going to skip around a little bit. The night of the first kiss, I held an emergency meeting with my mom and our sister in our living room. I considered looping my dad in on speakerphone, but my mom objected. What good will your dad be, she asked. He's probably a worse kisser than John. I hadn't called this meeting to discuss kissing techniques, but my mother took digs at my dad whenever she could, which, to be honest, was warranted. 12 years after I'd first suggested it, my mom finally filed for divorce. It had taken my dad introducing 4-year-old Chewy to his mistress at Orange Julius. Afterward, Chewy paraded through the house, waving his smoothie in the air, screaming, "Grandma, Grandpa has a girlfriend." Usually I could entertain this, but not today. After a full day of brooding, I'd managed to convince myself that John might kill me, albeit accidentally, but still. Anyone willing to spend $1,200 on a kiss had to be starved for affection. I imagined John's desperate aggression like a St. Bernard hurtling towards its beloved owner, back from a years-long vacation. The shift in my mind was immediate. The second John asked me for sex, he morphed from a lonely, innocent man into a threat. What if, I asked my mom and sister, John doesn't realize how hard he's pressing into my face and he suffocates me? That won't happen, my mom assured me, squeezing my hand. You'd faint before you died, my sister added, and he totally noticed that. My mom walked through the door and said, when you kiss him, think of the money. And if you do faint, tell him to wave a stack of hundreds in front of your nose. She laughed before she could deliver the punchline. The smell should wake you up.
Okay.
As I drove away from the apartment, I watched the sun I'd known for 24 years set on my world just as a new menacing moon was dawning. If I had any sense, I would have talked to one of those counseling interns who works on a sliding pay scale. A shrink could have diagnosed my death by kissing thoughts as anxiety and given me a safe space to unload. But I didn't even trust a professional secret keeper. Instead, I resolved to buy a few vodka shooters on my way to the Cheesecake Factory. I'll skip forward a little bit. Okay. Here we are at the Cheesecake Factory. Halfway through a plate of fettuccine alfredo, I was able to make eye contact with John without seeing double. He took a bite of herb-crusted salmon, and I pronged a piece of steamed broccoli. It was still crisp. I just want to say something really quick. My friend sent me a meme recently, and I guess it was a list of all the places women refuse to go on a first date to. Number 1 was Cheesecake Factory. And I was like, that, I had never been to one. I was like, they're just fancy. So whenever I think of it now, I'm like, that's so embarrassing. But I thought it was classy. Growing up, we only ate very canned vegetables, I told John. Our cabinets looked apocalypse ready. I went on describing how aside from the endless green giant tins, we had canned raviolis and beans. My freezer was especially lively, as my family's concept of cooking started with slitting plastic film covers and ended with pushing start on the microwave. I didn't even know what asparagus was until I was 20. My mom swears that's not true, but I swear it was. Does your family eat healthy now? John asked. They're still figuring it out. In the summer of 2014, when I turned 23, I converted to vegetarian and then forced my family to watch every health documentary on Netflix. During inspiring scenes of professional transformation, 30-day vegans comparing their before and after cholesterol levels, and then vowing to exchange prescription meds for fruits and nuts, I asked if anyone was interested in swapping chicken tenders for tofu. The answer was a unanimous, fuck no. I tried another angle. What if I told you we'd save literally thousands of dollars a year cooking at home? My sister spoke with the group. We do not tell you how to spend your money. Do not tell us how to spend ours. She was right. So last week I'd spent an unprecedented $200, which again, 2015, this is 1,000 now, at Sprouts buying groceries for a lot of us. I bagged a bundle of carrots with the green top still attached, the first our household had ever seen, and added nutritionist to the mental list of roles I played in my family. When my mom and nephew arrived home later, I told them I had a surprise. I covered my nephew's eyes with my hands and guided him into the kitchen. My mom opened the fridge before I could create suspense with a countdown. Ta-da, I said. What are these? My nephew asked, holding up a bag of Brussels sprouts. They're Brussels sprouts, I said. Ew, my mom said, and they laughed and laughed like vegetables were a big, stupid joke. I find your story inspiring, John said. He told me this often, usually when telling me how impressive it was that I had worked full-time in college, something he never had to do because his father paid for his degree and his living expenses. Now, however, it was inspiring that I ate broccoli. Thank you, I said slowly. Sometimes I can't believe that my 17-year-old self, a kid who'd never tasted a fresh vegetable, had the wherewithal to figure out a FAFSA. You must have been really smart, he said. More like desperate. Well, I'm so glad I can help you now, John said. And while I'd grown accustomed to men at Penthouse treating me like a charity case, this condensation felt weird and worse from John. I was no longer Lola, the dancer who could take men's cash and disappear into the night, shaking off their savior complexes. Here I was Michelle, who had to sit across from John and thank him over and over again for his generosity. I mean, he was helping me, but wasn't I helping him too? Weren't we striking a deal? Clearly I needed cash, just as John needed someone to connect to touch him, to see him. Enough so that he was willing to pay a $60,000 salary. You're getting paid to be agreeable, I told myself, and smiled a big, shiny smile, but I felt the truth graze my heart like a dagger. I refused to gaslight myself, so I finished John's sentence in my head. I am so glad you can help me, Michelle, now that you've agreed to bang me. I really enjoyed our romantic evening, John said. I tensed at the sentiment. Now I'm going to the end. It was too suggestive that there wasn't compensation involved, which felt like an odd thing to do within the walls of an arrangement. I had sputtered plenty of white lies to keep John a secret as it was, why I was missing shifts at Penthouse or where I'd got a new jacket from, etc. It seemed like overkill to skirt around the truth with one another. Our liaison was based on transparency. I reasoned that a part of sugaring was maintaining a fantasy that John understood was fraudulent. I forced another smile, and then John asked, "Can I kiss you?" Alas, I'd arrived. I had the feeling of fastening into a roller coaster, the sensation of dread as the car inches up and up and up until there is nothing but air below, the view beyond, and the thought, I have got to get off this ride, I do not want to do it. It wasn't necessarily John that was the problem, but what this job meant for my relationship with myself. I lived in a world that saw my body, sex with my body specifically, as bartering gold. As much as I complained about patriarchal ideals, I sure did oblige when they benefited me. I thought of Roxane Gay's book, Bad Feminist, and I tried to liken myself to her. We sometimes contradicted ourselves, but how could we not? We were flawed creatures living in a flawed world. John moved closer. I had to either back away now and return to the world I'd come from, or fall forward and hope that at the other side of the small self-betrayal, I would land on greener pastures. I closed my eyes, leaned in, and puckered up. 3 tense pecs. The stubble of his shaven face pricked my skin. I had forgotten that feeling. I waited for John to slip his tongue into my mouth, but it did not come. He released me from his arms and smiled. That was so nice, he said. You've such soft lips. The kisses were so non-invasive that for the first time that night, I felt hopeful, like I could do it, like it'd be easy. And then John's hand sank into his coat and reemerged with a bank envelope that contained $1,200. When he offered it to me, I tucked it into my own pocket and then draped my arms around his neck and kissed him again. Still not with tongue, but with less rigidity. There was no fireworks, no butterflies. It was like planting my foot on the first rung of a ladder. By the time I arrived home, John had texted me. The kiss was so wonderful, thank you. Maybe next time we could have a home run? I can't help it. I'm not a horn dog, you're just so sexy. Heart. This wasn't sex I was saying yes to, but an opportunity to pay off my student loan debt. Enough cash to take care of my car, a night off, a moment to breathe, the mental space to write my stories. It wasn't sex that awaited me in the future, but a mouthful of fillings. A better life is on the other side. That's all I could think. I replied, sure. John responded immediately. He would rent a room at the Marriott after Christmas shopping. You can buy anything you like, he said. I'm feeling generous. I dragged myself up the apartment building steps to the 2nd floor, trying to process what I just agreed to, but it was lost on me. When I opened the front door, my family clamored around me, grabbing the bags of takeout, fighting over the chicken Bellagio and red velvet cheesecake. My mom and sister wanted to know about the kiss, but they would ask later, during the slow lull of digestion. It was fine, I would tell them. Everything was fine.
Michelle, can I just say you're so funny? I mean, it's so nice to hear you read this aloud, because in those moments I was like chuckling to myself, and I think it's such a skill to make people laugh in a book. We're gonna ask some questions, or I'm gonna ask some questions. We're gonna talk about this book, and then hopefully you all can think of some questions too. We'll have some time to hear from you all, and so write your notes, get your questions ready. But you know, when you read about these scenes with your family, I was really glad to hear that aloud. And you talked about, I was their nutritionist, and I was thinking you were their caretaker, provider, babysitter, you know, mediator between your parents. And then so it's like a very rich family relationship that you discuss. And then I was thinking about John's family and how there's this distance, there's not a lot of connection, and how he sort of responds to your family as like, I love that you do this with your family, I love what you all do together. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how money impacts familial relationships. Does more of it make us more isolated? Does less of us make us more connected? What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, thank you for the compliment. I'm always happy when people find the book funny, so you know, I'm glad. And yeah, I think it's so interesting to talk about class, and I think to have these two different examples of it, which is my family, who's obviously like sharing this like tiny apartment, and there's 4 of us in there, and it's actually like really loving. And I think when my mom was like sort of reading it, she was like, people sometimes are like, oh my god, I like get so mad at your family. And at the first reading I ever did in Denver, like for the book, like the person introducing it just happened to be like, I got so mad at your family sometimes. And my mom was sitting next to my partner, and my mom was like, oh, why are they mad at me? Why are they mad at me? and then my partner was like, they're just confused about like you supporting Michelle being a sugar baby. And she was like, oh, okay, never mind. And then at the very end, she literally, well, it was like during Q&A time, and she was like raised her hand, and she was like, I want everybody here to know that I'm not ashamed of her. We are not ashamed of anything she did, and we love her, and we know about it. And so I think that can like be really surprising to people, you know. And I think sometimes people that like have had different backgrounds or have had different family relationships like think it's weird, or they wonder like, are my parents bad parents for like having been supportive of this? And to me, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just so grateful that I had a family who was so supportive and kind and understanding, and who continuously does like, I don't know, can back me up with it. And I don't know, I mean, I can only speak from like my own class experience and sort of like think about John's family, and I think families that are like have more wealth. But I think playing different roles too like is something that like families that have different class backgrounds just like do. Like you do have to like be the babysitter to like your little sister sometimes, or like your cousins, or like my nephew, you know, like I always think of my nephew as like my baby too, you know. And I think that that's really nice, actually. You know, I think that there's like a lot of criticism sometimes, and I think therapists can sometimes be critical of this. I was thinking about how, like, you know, I used to always tell my therapist, like, oh, my family needs me and it's like stressing me out, or they're like, they need money from me. And then my therapist is always like, don't give them money because like they need to like figure out how to do it on their own. And I'm like, they don't have a fucking option sometimes. And my new therapist is like, her in-laws live with her. And so it's like for the first time ever, I'm having a therapist be like, that's what you gotta do, like that's family. And I feel like that's much more realistic because, like, I don't know, you have to just take on multiple roles sometimes. And like you can either feel slighted by that and be like, I have all this responsibility. And sometimes it does suck, especially when it's like money. But I think like it also builds like this really close connection. Like that's how I experienced it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast about how we have become more individualists, or individualism. Maybe a lot of people have been hearing about that. And it's like the more access to wealth or the more access to convenience makes us more individual, whereas we had more communal. Well, in the past, there was more emphasis on community and like and that. And so it feels like. And
Was this with Trevor Noah?
No, but
okay.
Now I want to know what you're talking about. But yeah, it's sort of like people are more happy the more they achieve and do well. And so it's really interesting just all the joy that you kind of represent in your book with your family, even though there's this also like financial insecurity or anxiety or security issues. So.
Yeah, there's a quote too that I heard from Trevor Noah where he was saying that like, oh, it's so interesting that like during like in the capitalist era, like what happens, like the first thing you get rid of is community, and then you spend all your money trying to buy it back, you know, like trying to buy a connection, and then trying to buy like someone to help you support your kids, and like so, and I think that that's like really interesting, you know.
Yeah. And then now AI,
to
watch your kids. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. There's this line in the beginning of the book that's where your father says, might as well have stuck with poetry. Pursuing your dream or passions or even these feminist interests of yours is for rich people.
Yeah.
So my first question as a poet, I'm like, do story poems. And then my second question is, do you think that that's true? What are your thoughts of pursuing dreams and passions within our capitalist society?
Yeah. So this quote comes in from like my dad. He was always telling me when I was in high school, like, do not go to college. College is a scam. Like, college is for rich people. You are not rich. And he was always like, you need to be a truck driver, Michelle. Like, I'm a truck driver. You need to go to truck driver school, get your CDL, and then you're gonna get a job the day you finish your program. And I was always like, fuck you, Dad. Like, I'm an artist. I have my passions. And he was always like, passions are for rich people, Michelle. You need a job. And so then when I went to school, I actually went and got a women and gender studies degree. And he was like, that's worse. That's worse than like doing art. And so I don't know. But so, and I think that there is, you know, I guess it like mattered to me in the sense where I was like, I guess like pursuing women and gender studies, my other passion, is better than like trying to be an artist. I don't write poetry anymore. It was always like, it was like lyrics mostly.
You'll get back. You'll come back.
I know. I do. My wife's a poet, and I'm always like, I should try to come back to this. But it's like my 13-year-old self, you know. I don't know, I'm like embarrassed to even think about it, you know? But I do think, you know, it's something that my therapist and I talk about. I love her, I bring her up all the time. But we were talking about my sister a little bit, you know, and I was like, God, I feel like my life looks so different than like my life like in the era of the book. But like my family lived like exactly the same, you know? So it's like I'm in like a different situation now, and then I got like a master's because it was funded, you know, through the school for like having a TA-ship. And so I'm like, wow, I got like a career and I like got myself into a different situation. But like my family is in the exact same situation that they were in, you know? And then sometimes I would get frustrated like with my sister, where I'll be like, she's just like not emotional, she's like not healing herself, she's like not connecting. And my therapist was always telling me like about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I was like, and she was like, you know, how do you get to self-actualization, which like sits at the very top of the pyramid, if you like truly do not have security, you know? And so that's something I like to think about a lot, where I'm like, yeah, it is really difficult to like pursue self-actualization in art and all of these things when like you just like don't have your basic needs met, which is like, can I pay my rent? Like, can I afford gas in my car? Can I actually afford to eat without putting on a credit card, you know? Because I think, like it's like weighs on the body, you know? And I will say that like I feel like my life opened up so much when I was sugaring, you know, because I suddenly didn't have to be thinking about I remember like having the thought where like I would just go to the gas station and I like didn't have to look at how much like the gas was per gallon, and I was like, that's wild, like that's such a wild experience to have. And but I really think like all of these small things, like they weigh you down, they weigh you down, they weigh you down, and you don't have like endless capacity to like be pursuing, especially not in like a career way, you know. And also like these things are expensive. Like I was trying to explain to my dad now like my book and stuff, because I think when I first was writing it, I was like writing about them, you know. So I was like, I'm gonna make millions off this book. I'm gonna pay you, like you're all gonna make money, we're gonna be so rich. And then the reality of it came, and then I was like, no one's getting any money, like not me either, like no one is getting money. Please don't ask me for anything.
I'm actually paid.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm paying so much money, like to support this. And then my wife was actually like, you know, it's like skiing. Like tell him it's like skiing. Like you pay to have your hobby. Like he will understand that like sometimes your hobby costs you money. And so like now that's how I explain it. I'm like, it's my hobby that I pay for, that I love, and no one's getting any money off of it.
Well, I sometimes think of that game of life, you know, the board game, and you get life tiles, and by the end it's like, these are all your experiences. I'm like, maybe that's money in a way.
The money of the spirit.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, I was thinking about, there's a scene in the book about where you get this genius idea about the life insurance policy, and you're like, we're gonna take a life insurance policy out on, well, you were gonna do your parents, and then you're like, we're going to see your grandma, so we're gonna do this. And it's like this excitement about the potential of money, similar to what you were saying about this excitement of like, I'm gonna write this book, we're gonna be millionaires. And I feel like, you know, I grew up low income, very poor in Roxbury in Boston. And I remember just like the potential of money feeling so exciting, and like you can kind of live off of that potential. Yeah. And so I'm curious like how you think about the potential of money, especially people who grow up with lower class, you know, influence and all of that. Like how does that sort of work, or how do people grapple with that in your experience?
I really like that. That's that whole chapter in the book. So basically what happens is that I like know I want to leave like sugar babying behind. I'm trying to do any spoilers, but then like a professor of mine actually, like it was not a great relationship, but he had this idea of like a life insurance policy being like I'm confused with how I wrote in the book now, because, you know, identity things. Anyway, he comes up with this idea that he was telling me about where, like, you could get life insurance off your parent, basically, and, like, they just have to agree to it. And then I was thinking about, like, a savings account, literally. Where I was like, okay, like, one day they're gonna have to pass away. I can't help that. They can't help it either. And so I was like, instead of putting my money into, like, the Vanguard or something, I don't know, the stock market, I was like, I'll put into a life insurance policy, and I'll do like $1 million, and then when they pass away, like I'm gonna get $1 million. And so then I was so excited about it, because I was like, this is guaranteed. And then I told my dad about it, and my dad was like, that's such a good idea. We should get one on your grandma instead together. And I was like, absolutely. And so it doesn't work out, of course, but I think it's easy to grasp onto that and be like, oh my God, like did I just find the loophole into like a completely different world? And I mean, enough that like I think my dad did that too. I think we all were like this book is gonna get us to another world, you know. I think it's easy sometimes to be like, is this gonna be the thing that changes my whole life? And for me, like meeting John was a thing that like I think put me into a completely different world. But yeah, so I do think it's easy sometimes to fixate and be like, how am I gonna do that? And I think you scheme more, you know. Yeah. And there's this quote on like what is it? It's a cooking show. Hold on. What's it? Chef's. What is it? It's not Chef's Table. Someone knows this show. It's like about chefs. Nobody knows the show? Okay.
Yes, chef. I don't know.
Is it chalk?
No, it's like where they follow one chef around and they like talk about like their lives. I can't remember.
Know what the show is.
Anyway, it's like it's on Netflix and like they do one like chef at a time per episode and they just like talk about their life. And there was this one, it was like a Oaxacan chef, and then he was saying like Mexico is like rich in its poverty because like he was talking about like what kind of ingredients you end up using when you don't have like excess. And I feel like that is the case of like growing up without money. Like you're creative in your world. You like have different ways of being creative. You take anything and you run with it and you're like maybe this can change my life.
Yeah. I mean, I was very impressed the strategy or the strategic thinking of you and your family in this book. And you know, I think that's really interesting. Like I actually want to watch the episode now. So I'd also like to talk about, like, you were talking about John in the excerpt that you read, and I've been reading a lot about, like, this loneliness epidemic, especially in relationship to, like, cis white men specifically. And I was thinking of, like, does this act of it's like you're kind of monetizing this epidemic, which feels like, I'm like, ooh, I love that in the book. And so I'm wondering, does this feel like an act of reclamation for you? And you know, how does that relate to your understanding of power?
This is a really good question. Yeah, John was Chinese American as well, but I think there is like this. But I know, but it's like so refers to this like cis white like men epidemic of loneliness, and it's like actually just like people finally getting fed up with I think being treated poorly, and then it's such a response to that where women are finally being like absolutely not, like I want a man who's like kind to me, and then they're like so mad, so now they're just like on Joe Rogan like being like fuck women. I'm like trying to get my nephew away from it. I'm like, do not listen to Joe Rogan, but he doesn't know who Joe Rogan is. But I think it like that just happened accidentally, you know. It's like the cause and the effect, and I think just like strip clubs have always served as this sort of space, where I think that people think it's like a hyper, and it is. I mean, obviously it's like a sexual space in terms of like bodies and stuff, but it's so emotional. Like it's like who comes in there is that you have like two crowds, and one is like your crowd of like young men who are like, it's a bachelor party, I don't have any money, I'm here for the drinks and like for the vibes. And then the other one are like regulars who come in, and they come in after work and they're lonely and they're married and they're still lonely because they actually like patriarchy teaches us to like not be emotional, which is such a problem. And then they come to these women and they like and then they like have an illusion about like they have like delusional relationships. This is what I think my entire arrangement was like a delusional relationship where I don't know why he felt like able to like confess everything to me. Although I was reading this really amazing book. It was an anthology called The Holy Hour, and it's like with Working Girls Press. It's a small press, but it was an anthology. And there was one essay in there, and it was saying, because the girl was writing about like these men, like they like always confess things about themselves. And I found like John always confessed things to me, and he told me in the end like no one in this world knows you better than you. And I'm like, that's so crazy, but also there's something like about being vulnerable in this, and like I think accessing desire, which is like actually I do want to be connected, actually I do like have a sexual energy inside of me, like I don't want to just be a provider, which I think is like what men are told, you know, and I think it's what John is told, and I think that has to do with class as well. It's like you are a provider, that is all you do. And like they don't even realize how much it hurts them, you know. Like this is what we mean, like patriarchy hurts everyone, because it's like it creates this loneliness, and they don't even understand where it stems from, you know. And so then I think of these like sort of roles, like with sex workers, like there's an inability to like be more authentic because like they're engaging with someone who like they're like isn't going to translate to their real life or something, you know.
That's pretty incredible. It's like, first of all, that woman in gender studies degree coming in clutch, and also I feel like it's kind of related to some of the, like you said, delusions, like these men have delusions. I feel like there's similar delusions that you talk about, like in your college classes when you're talking about sex work, and the students or your peers talking about, or like judging and having these really adverse reactions to sex work, like full stop. And so I feel like there are these delusions that we have about particular ways of making money, or also this like intimacy that you're referring to. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about that, like this experience or that dissonance for you in that classroom, or just even like now you're on tour talking about this, especially in thinking about like, you know, I feel like in the classroom, people have this view of like sex work as like, what are they doing? They're selling their bodies, like they're kind of othered, and they're not all part, we're not all part of the same society. So I'm curious to know like just how you've been thinking about that lately, especially so far after that experience.
Yeah, this is a really nice question as well. And the scene that you're talking about in the book, it takes place in a classroom where like people are, and the school that I went to like really was a commuter school, like so people were like in my same sort of world of class, you know, and so there was a lot of us, and I think that and they were kind of talking about like, oh, sex work is like just feeling like having all this negative thoughts, right? Like, it's the easy way out, etc. Like it's just sort of that mentality of like anybody could do this. But you know what I find is really interesting, and I'm sure many of you relate, is like people are always like, oh, I could be a stripper, like that's, I always keep that as my backup plan. Like I could be a dancer, you know. And I see it on like the reels or like Instagram all the time of like, if things don't work out for me, like I could do that, or like I could find a sugar daddy, or I could like work the streets, or get like, I guess the new thing is OnlyFans, right? And so I think, but people talk about this all the time, and I genuinely believe that like we're all told this message of like, if everything else fails you, here's an option for you. But if you take this option, everyone will hate you for the rest of your life. And so, I think I lived in that world, and then I took the option, you know, and I was like, oh my God, this is I think why I talk about secrecy so much in the book, and like the only people I felt like I could be honest with was my family, because I had been a dancer when I was 19, and I had like a pretty progressive group of friends, you know, and I told everyone very freely then, and everybody had like a really bad opinion of it, actually very quickly, you know. And so when I was a little bit older, I was 24, I was working at the club, I was like, I'm not going to tell anyone except my family, because they had like been cool with it the first time. And that was really helpful for me. And then I didn't have to worry about people like saying secretly stuff about me. And then when I met John, like I was certainly not going to tell anybody, you know. And I think I had to really deal with that with myself. And I really lived for a long time being like, this is something that like if anyone ever finds out, like it makes me completely undateable. It makes me like unhireable. It makes me like it's going to be like wearing the easy A thing basically for the rest of my life. And I think when I was able to confront that more, like it still scares me, you know. And I think being queer, like I have to out myself a lot because I look femme, and I also have to out myself endlessly as a sex worker, you know. And that is like, or a former sex worker, but that's like scarier to me, you know. And so, and you don't ever know, like, and I think in professional context, like, it's scary, and it's I don't know, people have their judgments, and it's kind of funny, because sometimes when I go to talk to classes, students are like, nobody cares about this anymore, like, sex work is cool, and then I'm like, am I, like, crazy? Like, am I just old as hell, and, like, the culture has changed? And then I, like, put things on the internet, and then I'm, like, getting harassed, and I'm like, never mind, like, these students they're, like, crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and you really describe in this book, like, this is not an easy job, you know, and I think that's really interesting about the book, because everyone perceives it to be easy, and you talk about the emotional toll, and it's like, you spend all those years in the club, almost like, and you're like working up your way up, and it's like, this is your promotion in a way, like you did John, so it's like labor.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping you can answer just one more question before we get to your questions. And that is, can you talk about the process of writing this book? Like, a lot of times in the book you're saying, oh, I wrote this note down, I didn't want to forget it. Like, you're really transcribing a lot of your experience in real time. So I'm curious how that worked then, and then like how you compiled everything for the book, the way it showed up today.
Yeah, for sure. Writing a book is so hard, you know, and I'm sure some of you relate to this. But I think going from like the book for me actually started like I was writing all these notes, and I've just always journaled forever, and I'm so grateful for that because I feel like it's like trained me to like write down quotes, and my family's so ridiculous, so I've always been like just wanting to transcribe things they said, and then John would say crazy things too, so I think I was just in the habit of like transcribing mostly quotes actually, and then journaling about like experiences that I was having. And so that was really helpful to come back to. But this book actually oddly started from I was like writing an essay. It's the chapter about the insurance. So like the insurance plan. And I just thought it was like totally absurd, you know. And so I started with an essay about that. And then I started my MFA program. I think there's people in this room that are in an MFA program. And I had gone to that program and I had not admitted that I was a sex worker prior to getting in. So like what I submitted was not about this. And then I turned this essay in and I had removed any mention of sex work. So I was just like, me and my dad like have $5,000 and we're gonna like get this insurance policy. And then I was talking to my professor and I don't know, just like it was like coming out in that moment of like there's actually this other thing. And then so like that was kind of the first experiences like in these workshops of me like being honest about being a sex worker, and people were so supportive and I was shocked. But these were also like 7 people that were like very abstract from my real life. But I think writing became like a process for me to do it. But anyway, my professor was like asking about this chapter, and then he got me talking about it. And then when I told him the whole story, he was like, actually, this is an entire book, and like you need to go back. Because like that chapter takes place in 2017. I met John in 2015. And so I basically had to like go back to 2015 and start from there. And then I wrote the draft, I think in like 2 years, and I was very diligent. I'm a Virgo, and I was just Virgo energy was coming to it. And I also, I think this is a class thing, but I knew that my program had 3 years, and I knew that when those 3 years were up, I needed to get a job immediately. And so I was like, all right, I have 3 years to write this book, to get an agent, to get a book deal. It took 7, by the way. Had to get a job in between. But I did get an agent at the very end of my program. And so I was like, all right, now I just can get a job, it'll be fine. But so I used those, I was really, really intense with myself at that time. And I just wrote it chronologically. I think people think that's boring, not me. I just like to know what I'm doing. And then I edited the hell out of it, and then I have an agent who was amazing and really edited it with me, and so that was thank God, because I didn't want to think about what she got originally. And so that's kind of how the process went, and that took 6 years, and then my last year was just working with the editor.
Thank you for sharing that. What a journey. Okay, now for the audience questions. There's going to be someone running around with a mic.
I can just give you this. Oh, okay, so you don't have to do that.
Okay, so I have 2 comments and a question, so sorry. First of all, I'm going to caveat this by saying that this is probably one of the best books I've ever read. Sorry. True, and my entire friend group, all my coworkers, everyone thinks so.
That's so nice, thank you.
I could. And then, second comment, here's something my friends who really wanted to be here, but couldn't, you know them, want me to say. Can you please say Hope and Ashley said this is their favorite book? And I've had many conversations about it because of just how devastating and tender and beautiful and funny the story is, as well as how impeccably it's crafted.
Oh, that's so nice, thank you.
I'm gonna cry.
I know.
I don't know. This is amazing.
My question was, when you were writing it, I admire just how vulnerable, it takes so much courage to just, how vulnerable you've been throughout the. Were there ever any parts that you had written and then you felt like you had to remove, or parts that you did remove? Was there anxiety while writing it? What did that feel like?
Yeah, thank you for all those comments. It was so kind. And yeah, for definitely. I also there was a moment where there's a professor character in here who I have a romantic relationship with. And I tell him about being a sugar baby, and then he endlessly tries to make money off of me, in every way possible. With the insurance thing, also he would tell me about it, and then was cut me 20% for the rest of your life for this. And there's so many other ways, but I got really, really scared because he's also trying to make money all the time. And so I was there's no way he's not gonna. And again, I really was delusional. I was I'm gonna make millions of dollars off this book. And so then I was he's gonna come after me because he want my millions of dollars, So I also not only imagined it, but I also was getting ready to be sued off this money I was gonna make. And so I got really scared, and I was and then the Amber Heard and what's his name, Johnny Depp trial happened, and then she lost, and I was like, are you fucking serious? And so then I was like, I could feel the cultural tide shifting, right? Where I think like we had like such a surge with like the Me Too movement, but then there was such pushback towards it, and then I think like that was like, they're making examples out of like, we're not just, I don't know, like just not liking women speaking out about this stuff again. And so I think I was like, this is going to go badly for me, and that he will try and get my money. And so I actually took him out of the book completely, and then my agent was like, absolutely not, like the story does not make sense, especially like the end does not make sense without like this character in it. And so then I was glad that she like pushed me to put him back in it, but I was really scared, and I have been so scared this whole year. Me and my friend who's in the back, we've been doing spells all year. We're like doing protection spells, we're like burning shit like every day, you know, I'm not kidding you. And then my therapist is like, you are having anticipatory anxiety. And I'm like, I don't care, we were still doing it, which I think it worked. It's either that I didn't make money or that the spells worked, or both. But he left me alone. But so yeah, it's terrifying, you know. And I think with my family too, like I asked them like, do you want to read this? And they're like, oh, we'll read it when it's out, like, we trust you. And so when my mom like anxiety read it after like that first reading, when someone was like, fuck your family. And then she was like, but then she loved it, and then she was like giving it to people her job, you know, so she and her sisters and everything. So I was like nervous at first. And then John, like he actually read a lot of excerpts that were like on the internet when they first were coming out. And this is just something I love that he said that I thought was so funny. He said, I'm sorry for the trauma, LOL. He said, I loved it, by the way, it's so funny. Sorry for the trauma, LOL.
That's oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I actually was wondering if John had read the book, so.
Yeah. He's probably read it. He hasn't thing to me now, but that was like the last thing he said. But I told him then I was going to write it, and he wasn't like telling me not to.
You need some merch that says like,
Yeah, sorry
for the trauma.
LOL.
LOL.
Hello. It was so great hearing your voice, both out loud here, that was really a pleasure, but also just on the page, and I think you created a really immersive experience for us with your delivery and your prose. But I was just wondering, could you speak to what extent is it you now who's narrating this book looking back versus you in that moment? Like, which voice were you trying to capture, or did you alternate?
That's a really good question. I really tried to capture the voice in the moment. I really did. I think I started writing this book like very few months after I had left the arrangement, so it was very fresh. And I really wanted to, and I guess people can tell that I really heavily sort of was reading a ton of fiction, you know. And so I think I really wanted to build it, like, because I felt like it was very plot heavy, you know, like it's a memoir, and of course like a lot of like nonfiction, we want to have like the dual narrator of like now and old, but I really wanted like the narrator to be 24 and to be like 24, 25, 26, and to be sort of figuring it out with the reader, and I thought like it was suspenseful enough that like it made sense to write in that way. And I had a professor who was like, you need a dual narrator, you need a now narrator writing back, and I was like, no, and I always want to tell him like it worked, you know. But that was like a decision I made, I had to fight for, and I feel really happy with it, because I do think there are like tools in the book that like give it a sense of a dual, like a now narrator looking back, but also like the decision making is very much 24-year-old, and it's very much situational. Like, okay, I'm getting this money, what am I going to do with it? Like, she's really thinking it through versus being like, this was like looking back, I was going to spend $35,000 on my debt. Like, it seemed funner to me to like write it in the way of like how she was making those, or I was making those choices. And when I read it now, I love it. I'm like so happy about it. And it like makes me feel, because I am 10 years older than whoever, you know, had experienced this book, and it makes me feel really like I'm reading my diary. Like I get to experience myself as a 24-year-old, and like I love the decisions that I was making, and they really they make me like so happy now. I'm like, wow, she was crazy, but she was so smart.
Hi. I love this book. I think the humor like totally landed. It was so enjoyable to read. And I think someone who hasn't been in sex work, but I think I connected with it on a lot of levels. Being 20-something-year-old, growing up low income, so But my question is in regards to audience. When you were writing this, did you ever have an audience in mind? I think as writers, we either consciously or subconsciously have an audience in mind. So I'm just wondering if you were maybe thinking of, I mean, aside from like the general public when you published this, if you had a group in mind.
Yeah, that's a great question. This is probably the wrong answer, but I did not have a group in mind. I think when I was writing this book, I had to pretend no one was ever going to read it as well. So my sort of audience was it didn't exist. It was either like they were non-existent, or it was like the grandest people who just wanted to buy 5 copies for everyone they knew.
So you can be a millionaire.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying counting like how many do I need to sell. But no, I'm kidding. But I really didn't. I had to like not think of an audience, you know. And I guess I was like probably like, oh well, women will probably relate to this more. Because I do think I think it's a sex work memoir, or it's about sex work, and I think that's like the clickbaity title actually, but it's so much more than that. Like it's about family, and I think so many women, and the more and more that I speak to them, and the more I speak to audiences, like even if they have not been a sex worker, like they relate to some kind of exchange for themselves, and like to have security or safety or money or something, you know, and like whatever that like relationship can look like. It doesn't need to be romantic, but I think that women are constantly put in situations that like are unique to them, and like especially young women, where it's like, do you want to get ahead? Like, do you just even want safety? Like, and what kind of exchanges do we make all the time? So, to me, I always thought like this memoir is like not just for people who were sex workers, although of course it is as well. But I really wanted people like outside of that to read this book.
My question, you touched on it a little bit, where you said that John had actually read some of the excerpts. I was wondering how you like felt about that, like before and after. Like, were you scared that he was going to like find the book, or like
Yeah, well, I was definitely scared at first because, and I think when you're putting these things on the internet, like, or when you're getting published with lit mags, is like mostly what was happening, and like it kind of actually forced me. I knew whenever I was publishing them in lit mags, and as I started to write about it, like, it was going to force me to like have to confront this, because like people in my life like did not know, other than my family and like a very few friends, and so I didn't want people to find out about it on the internet. I guess I let John though. I don't know. I can't remember. But I like, so I went to Denver and I like had to go see my friends, and I was doing like coffees with like person to person. And so it like writing it helped me so much though, like confront it for myself, and that was like incredibly freeing. And I had been working with a different therapist at that point, but she was just telling me like, you know, for yourself, like you have to get to a point before you go on this like confessional journey where you like feel secure with yourself and like the decisions you made, because people might be like say something horrible to you and you can't like let it destroy your self-esteem. And so I think that by the end of like my first year, I had kind of gone to that, and then I had like made new friends in this like new city I was living, and I had like been living in a world like that I was claiming that, like, and owning that as a part of my story, and like it made sense to me. And so I did feel like, okay, like the whole world isn't going to turn on me if I'm being honest, and I think I was in a position where I could handle that. And then I think I was worried, like, what would John think? Because, I mean, I think it's sweet towards him, actually, and I think people say that, but it's not like it's embarrassing, of course, too. And it's like, it's vulnerable, you know, and I think even the excerpts that he read, like, I wrote, like, even longer ago, so they're much worse, and they're, like, worse jokes, you know, at his expense, and he was still, like, I think he couldn't help but be proud of me, because we did like have a genuine connection as well. So I think he like felt happy for me and proud, and also like he felt, but I was very scared, but I was very relieved like to have those conversations with him. And but like it's true to his nature, you know. Like I always thought like John is genuinely kind. And like I feel like even though I write like harder about John, I feel like I knew my professor would be much more cruel to me. Like no matter what I said about him, like I knew he was gonna like have offense with it. And with John, it's like it's so vulnerable, and yet like I could trust that like his genuine kindness, like, you know, he's misguided with some things, but he's not unkind. And so I think he brought that vibe to like talking to me about it.
We have time for one more question.
Hi.
great. I just wanted to say this book really stood out to me as someone who is in the service industry and also is like a caretaker for some disabled family members. This really stuck with me for those reasons. And I was just kind of curious if you could talk a little bit more about how you felt like sharing those kind of personal, private family matters with like the audience in the book. Because I know like there's a lot of times like feelings of like things that happen in the home need to stay in the home, and how you felt like, I know your family was very open and willing with this, but how that was like translating into the book as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for what you said, and I'm glad you found the connections in this book. I think it's vulnerable. I think to like have someone be a writer who's around you, like it is vulnerable in writing nonfiction. My parents knew and my family knew from the very, very start what I was writing about, that they were in it. And I think my mom she's certainly the most avoidant. Like my sister was also reading along like the whole time, and my dad, he's like not read it, but like he knows about it and everything. And I would read him his quotes because he was like, he like makes jokes from the TV, and so he had to tell me like some of that shit's from the TV, so like you can't put that in your book. And so like they're all very aware of it, you know. And so they were very supportive. I just want to tell you one thing quickly, and I'll go back to the question. I guess my parents got into a fight the other day. My sister was there, and they were like at dinner together. And then my dad was like talking about how he doesn't have a life insurance policy, when he's gonna spend every penny until he dies, and he's not gonna leave his kids anything. And my mom was like, "You're so selfish." And then he was like, "I don't give a shit about life insurance policies." And then my mom has read the book, but he hasn't. Was like, "That's not what Michelle's book said." And so I kind of like that it's like making its way into their drama too. But I don't know. I feel like very, very lucky, you know, to have a family that is like, I don't know. And I guess I have limitations though, you know, like maybe it seems like it's completely, everything is out there and there's nothing at all like private, but there are things that I like have that know like this would be a challenge for like my family, or this would be like really hurtful. And so I like do make decisions that aren't in there. And I guess like that's actually the truth, is like that it's not like maybe it seems like it's a lot, but I knew it wasn't shit they actually cared about, you know, or like that would hurt them. That is vulnerable, but it isn't like just like it wouldn't injure them, and it wouldn't injure our relationships.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. I think we're done.
Thank
we're
you
at the
both
end.
so much for everything and for being here. Please buy as many copies as you can. We have them for sale over here, and otherwise the signing will be at the front, just lining up in that direction. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Brooklyn, for having me. Thank you, Tatiana, for being here, and thank you all for being here and for your questions.